Hello, I'm Alexandra Sleator, Career Accelerator. And that means that working together, we can address your career challenges in a time and cost-effective way. Together, we can look at a range of challenges in the office. First, we can of course help you progress your career. That is to say that we can help you articulate a strategy to get a promotion which you deserve. We can also help you repackage your skills so that you can make a bid for a new role that opens up possibilities for you going forward. We can also help you with your career right here, right now, by working on polishing such fundamental skills like communication, and there I mean managing conflict, for example, or influencing and persuading others, as well as, for instance, motivating your team, embracing change, presenting with confidence, all sorts of core skills that position you well to be recognized in your role in the moment, and of course to be also positioning yourself for the future. Lastly, and last but by no means least, we can help you transition your career. We can help you return to the workforce if you've been on a career break. And we can also help you to redefine success if you think that you'd like to change not just a role but industry. So this is just a quick flavor of the kind of issues that we can work together. And career accelerations means that working together, you'll get to realize your career aspirations faster than you would on your own. So welcome to this second issue of Career Tips for the summer. And here we're following up on the previous article, which invited you to take a test to self-assess just how happy you are in the office. Indeed, I thought that with many of us having the chance of a break during the summer, it was a good opportunity to maybe take a step back and just think a little bit more broadly about our life in the office, and in particular whether it does fulfill us in the way that we can legitimately hope for it to. If you have missed that self-assessment and would like to take it, the URL is appearing at the bottom of the screen right now. In taking the test, you will be guided to ask yourself a number of questions, and if you answer the questions in the negative, the test therefore provides you with follow-up actions to take in order to increase your satisfaction in the office. For example, if you find that you are not comfortable in the office because you're sitting on an uncomfortable chair for hours on end and eventually breaking your back in the process, well, clearly the follow-up action is to take that up with occupational health and ask for the chair to be adjusted or even changed in order that you don't break your back. So there is embedded in the self-assessment test a number of follow-up actions for you if you feel that not everything is where it should be. So in this offering, we're no longer thinking about what can you do to be happier in the office, but rather who can you be. So we're going to look at the inner perspective of being happy in your work life rather than the outer perspective as we did last month. And in this view of who can you be in order to enhance and at least maintain your level of satisfaction about your work life, I want to offer to you four tips, effectively, four elements to think about. And the first thing is to remind us that how we see things is effectively how things are. The way that we think about a situation effectively determines how we feel about it. This is not something that's going to be very new to many of you. But what I'm always interested to notice is how often we forget that how we contemplate a situation effectively determines how we feel about it, and therefore, how happy or unhappy we feel about it. Now, research has demonstrated that when we have constructive, positive thoughts and therefore feel good, we are more creative, more innovative, we solve problems more quickly, and we have a broader perspective on things. You know, we have a broader range of the possible. Conversely, I think all of us have experienced how negative thoughts distract us from our task, prevent us from doing our best thinking, and generally cramp our style. And so I think it makes rather obvious sense, and I hope you will agree with me, that cultivating a constructive mental and emotional state of being is quite fundamental to indeed our welfare in the office, and therefore our capacity to perform and to enjoy. So how can we do that? Well, if indeed our thoughts determine how we feel, then let's look at our thoughts. So let me invite you to be more aware of what thoughts you're allowing yourself to have. It is so easy to get caught up into the many irritations that any workplace will throw at you. And some workplace environments are quite toxic. And so see what kind of thoughts you have about your workplace and just how negative those thoughts are. Watch out also for sensations, body sensations, because emotions usually carry an element of physiology that you can use as a telltale sign. So if you spot some sort of discomfort in your body, ask yourself what negative emotion is possibly at play and find the negative thought from which it originated. And once you found that thought, reframe it. Make it more constructive so that the emotional reaction also changes and you're not suffering from those negative thoughts and emotions in the way we've just discussed. So let me give you an illustration of that. For example, if you feel really irritated and you say to yourself, I don't want to go to this committee because all we do is faff around for an hour and get nothing done. How about reframing the sentence in the following way? I'm not looking forward to this committee because we tend not to achieve very much. But an hour will pass quickly and I'll soon be back at my desk working on more interesting things. You see how the second thought will allow you to be less distracted by this irritation around the committee and therefore will allow you to both before and after the committee to attend more to the work you are interested in, to focus more and to be creative or problem solving or whatever you need to be. So that's the first tip, which is that I invite you to become more aware of the thoughts that you're allowing to have and to understand that your thoughts can be managed. Now, I think that many of us do try to manage our thoughts. We are not necessarily aware that we're doing that, but we do try to do that. And for those of you who've tried, you may have noticed that it's actually much tougher to do than I implied in the above example. And this is about the second tip. If we want to manage our thoughts, and if we want, when we have negative ones, to reframe them into more constructive views, how do we do that anyway? And let me also remind you that while you may struggle to manage your thoughts, haven't you noticed that when somebody else has a problem, you're typically quite clear-eyed about what's going on, you're able to analyze what's happening to them, to be quite rational and dispassionate, and then to offer, hopefully, good advice. Conversely, you may have noticed that others usually are able to take quite a dispassionate view of your problems and to make comments that are quite rational and hopefully helpful as well. So what is going on here? What is going on is called psychological distance. When we're not caught up in the emotional entanglements of a challenging situation, we are able to step back. We have that psychological distance which enables us to analyze better, to make better judgment calls, to make better decisions about how to handle that situation. So what is fundamental to the process of managing one's thoughts and reframing them where they're not so constructive is that stepping back capacity, that capacity to distance yourself from the situation, to lower the emotional involvement, and to act, therefore, as your own advisor. To become your own advisor, imagine that you are somebody else, whoever makes sense for you. Could it be your best friend, whose judgment you value and trust? Could it be a favorite uncle who acts as a mentor? Whoever that person needs to be, call on them in your imagination and step into their shoes. That way you will step out of the situation, step into an advisory role, and you will be able to help yourself much better, having created that psychological distance. So the trick here is, if you were somebody else, what advice would you give yourself? That was tip number 2. In tip number 3 and 4, I want to look at the content of the advice that is going to be helpful to you. And the first piece of advice is around being sure not to give yourself bad advice. Now, what is bad advice? To me, bad advice is simply advice that doesn't make sense for me. Right? Have you noticed how often people will say, oh, if I were you, and then they give you advice about what they would do, but they're not you. So the advice can become completely irrelevant. It doesn't resonate with you. You couldn't do it even if you tried. That to me is the worst piece of advice. Not so much because the advice isn't good or bad, but because you cannot use it, because it's simply not in line with who you are. So a fundamental thing to pay attention to if you're going to give yourself some advice, now that you've been able to become that advisor to yourself, is give yourself advice which is in line with your authentic self. Advice that makes sense for who you are and who you can be. And in particular, in thinking about advice that resonates, that makes sense, that is natural to you, think of leveraging your strengths. Because when we are in the midst of a challenging situation, life has become complicated, and it doesn't need to become even more complex. So don't add to the difficulties by giving yourself that bad advice, that advice that makes no sense for who you are. But also don't make it worse by giving yourself advice which relies, for example, on skills, competencies, talents that you either don't have at all or have little of. It's just going to be too much work. And life, as I said, is already gotten more complicated anyway. Whereas if you give yourself advice that leverages your strengths, that's going to be much easier to pull off. So that was the third tip. Give yourself advice that respects your authentic self and leverages on your strengths. To conclude, another tip around the kind of advice that I suggest you consider giving yourself is to look at your role models. Indeed, looking at how the people we respect, we admire, behave, how they handle challenging situations is a great source of inspiration. Can really give us some fresh ideas about how to tackle a challenging situation. Now, often when I suggest that to people, they say to me, but I'm not going to be able to do like he does because I'm not them. And you don't need to be like your hero, your role model, to use their behavior. What you need, however, is to get that advisor of yours to consider how to integrate that behavior that inspires you in your role model into a framework which is natural to you. So it needs to be adapted, adjusted to make sense for you, so that indeed you can replicate with, again, some adjustments, some tweaks, that behavior that you saw as being helpful and inspirational. And that was the fourth topic. So to summarize, in order to have a mental and emotional state of self-being that enables you to enhance your happiness at work, to stay on a more even keel despite all the many irritations in the office, consider reframing some of the less constructive thoughts that you have. And if you would like to do that, practice stepping back, stepping out of the challenging situation you face by imagining that you're somebody else, somebody of your choice, and using that person to advise you with the benefit of psychological distance. You will become clearer-headed about your problem, and you will be able to make better decisions about how to handle the challenging situation. When you give yourself advice, when you are in that advisory position and you want to make recommendations to yourself, make sure to give yourself advice that resonates with who you are, which respects your authentic self, and plays as much as possible to your strengths rather than your shortcomings. And don't hesitate to find inspiration in other people's behaviors. Look at those people who are your role models and adjust their behaviors so that, again, it makes sense for you, respects your authentic self, and you can follow your own advice. So I hope that this gave you some good food for thought. Many of us are preparing to go back to school. The fall will soon be upon us, and the grind of the office will start again. Some of us haven't even had a summer lull, but I hope that these few thoughts will help you maintain more of an even keel despite all the ups and downs that naturally happen in an office. As usual, I would love to hear your thoughts, so if you'd like to comment, please do so in the box underneath this video, or of course you can email me directly to have a chat about your challenges and how to manage those. My email is appearing on the screen right now. This is time for me to say thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and take good care, and I will see you next month. Thank you so much again. Bye-bye.